She'll get us all killed." The shout echoed through the meeting room as a metal chair was kicked, grazing Rachel's head by inches. 12 seals roared with laughter, surrounding her like a pack of wild beasts. Steele, their leader, hoisted Rachel off the ground, her boots dangling helplessly. But in those small brown eyes, there was no pleading. Only silence, cold, dangerous, and enigmatic. They could never have imagined that, as the sun rose, the woman they mocked as just a band-aid patcher would be the one pulling them from hell, calling in artillery on a classified frequency no one dared mention. And from that moment, the entire SEAL team would be forced to ask, who is Rachel Cooper, really? A medic? Or a ghost returned from the dead? The prefab meeting room at Forward Operating Base Chapman had no windows, only fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over an atmosphere thick with sweat, cigarette smoke, and tension. On the wall hung a topographic map of Afghanistan, marked with red symbols like dried bloodstains yet to be scrubbed clean. In the center stood Lieutenant Brad Steele, towering like a bronze statue, his broad shoulders blocking the way, facing a petite woman in a worn medical uniform, Rachel Cooper. In the eyes of the men around her, she was an insult, an outsider intruding into their world, and they wanted to make sure she knew it. Steele stepped forward, his eyes blazing, his rough hand seizing the collar of her white blouse. One sharp yank, the fabric tore apart. The sound reverberated in the silent room like a bullet ripping through the air. The shredded cloth fell to the concrete floor, light as a feather but heavy as a sentence. Around her, 12 SEALs formed a circle. Each gaze was a dagger. A man with a skull tattoo on his neck let out a dry laugh, then kicked a metal chair into the wall. The clanging impact shook the room to its bones. Rachel didn't flinch. She clutched her medical kit to her chest like a fragile shield, but her eyes remained fixed forward. No begging, no tears. Steele gritted his teeth, his breath reeking of stale whiskey as it hit her face. "Tomorrow, we're going through Taliban Valley. You'll be dead in 5 minutes, and I won't let any of my men risk their lives to drag a useless body out of there." A rough hand lifted her off the ground. Rachel's combat boots dangled helplessly. Yet even in that suffocating moment, she held her gaze defiant, as if challenging the entire room. Long, agonizing seconds passed until Steele released her. Rachel fell, her knees slamming into the dry concrete. The sharp crack silenced the room for a fleeting moment. The door burst open. Colonel Sarah Winters strode in, her presence as sharp as a blade. Her eyes scanned the scene, the torn blouse, Rachel struggling to stand, the circle of SEALs like a pack of predators. "What the hell is going on here?" Her voice sliced through the air like metal clashing. Steele stood tall, unrepentant. "We need a combat medic, not a liability." He jerked his chin toward Rachel. "She'll get good men killed." Winters locked eyes with him, then turned to Rachel. Blood seeped from her grazed knee. But Rachel stood, back straight. "Sergeant Cooper stays." "That's an order." A wave of dissent rippled through the room. A young SEAL hurled a water bottle at the wall, liquid splashing and hitting Rachel's face like invisible shrapnel. "We're not babysitters," he roared. Winters took one step forward, her voice dropping to a storm's warning. "One more word, and I'll have Admiral Morrison ask why his elite team can't follow a simple order." Dismissed. One by one, the men left. Each one deliberately bumped Rachel's shoulder as they passed. Painful, but she didn't dodge. Steele was the last. He paused, leaned close, and whispered in her ear. "Pray, Band-Aid girl. Tomorrow, one of our men's blood will spill because of you." Then he left, his threat lingering in the heavy air. When the door slammed shut, Winters turned to Rachel. "I know they're wrong, but I need you on this mission. Can you handle it?" Rachel nodded, her voice steady despite a tremble. "Yes, ma'am. I can." A flicker of doubt crossed Winters' eyes, but she nodded. "Prep for the briefing. 6 a.m." As Rachel bent to pick up the torn blouse, Her hands finally stopped shaking. Deep in her mind, a buried memory stirred scornful voices from 3 years ago, from a mission never acknowledged, a mission that buried an entire unit. She took a deep breath, folded the fabric, and shoved the memory back into the depths. Not now. Not here. She had to survive tomorrow first. Outside, in the darkness, the valley waited, a trap of stone, sand, and guns. And within her own team, Rachel knew the greatest danger wasn't the Taliban, but the men who just called her a liability. The afternoon draped over the base like a heavy red dust blanket. Dry wind from the valley carried the lingering smell of gunpowder, and the clanging of metal echoed from the firing range at the camp's edge. There, 12 SEALs stood in a line, their muscular forms moving in sync like steel blocks. Rachel stood at the end of the line, her medical boots halting on the gravel-strewn concrete. No one made room for her. She was pushed to the edge, as if it were an unspoken ritual. The outsider always stood last. Steele signaled, 300 meters. 3 words, but his voice boomed like a hammer strike. The team raised their M4 rifles in unison, their movements so precise they resembled a religious rite. The first volley rang out, crisp and clean, and the distant targets shuddered, holes clustering tightly into a small circle. Each shot was the culmination of 5, 10, 15 years of training. The SEALs fired like seasoned musicians, performing a deadly symphony they knew by heart. When the firing ceased, a young SEAL named Jenkins deliberately nudged an ammo crate near Rachel. With one intentional shove, the crate slid off the edge, crashing onto the cement, bullets scattering like beads. Laughter erupted, sharp as scraping metal. "Butterfingers," Jenkins sneered, loud enough for all to hear. Rachel knelt, picking up each round. Her hands moved slowly, patiently, as if each bullet was a strike at her pride. No retort. She reloaded the magazine, her movements precise, mechanical, no motion wasted. When she stood, the wind whipped through her patched uniform, but her hands holding the rifle were steady. The heavy M4 slid into her shoulder, fitting like an old friend. An unusual silence fell as she lowered the barrel, taking a deep breath. The laughter and murmurs faded as the team noticed her stance. Not that of a doctor, not that of a rookie, but that of a trained marksman, honed by thousands of hours on battlefields. Her breathing slowed, the world narrowing to the sight and the faint silhouette 300 meters away. 5 shots. 5 seconds. The rifle cracked, rapid, clean, no rhythm wasted. The rangemaster called a ceasefire. The target slid forward, stopping before the team. 5 holes. Not scattered, not dispersed. All clustered so tightly they looked like a single crack from afar, and all dead center through the target's head. A suffocating silence followed. Jenkins gave a forced laugh, muttering, "Lucky shot." But his voice trembled, as if he didn't believe it himself. Steele said nothing. His eyes fixed on Rachel, not the target. He saw how she lowered the rifle, how her fingers maintained perfect trigger discipline, how she stepped back with the calm of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. A quiet undercurrent rippled through the SEALs. The contempt didn't vanish, but for the first time, a sliver of doubt crept in. Rachel didn't wait for acknowledgement. She removed the magazine, locked the safety, and turned away, as if it were routine. But inside, a familiar echo returned. The sound of gunfire like a heartbeat, the tense silence between shots, and the gazes of men unready to face the truth. The range fell silent for a few seconds, then other shots rang out, deliberately loud, as if to fill the void. But no one forgot those 5 shots. No one could deny the image of a target shredded as if carved by a scalpel. She returned to the barracks, her steps quiet, carrying the uneasy silence she'd sown in their minds. In the dim room, as Rachel set her rifle on the table, her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from memory. Other times, in places unrecorded, she'd shot like that, not to prove herself, but to survive. and to keep a promise to names that no longer existed. Late afternoon, as Afghanistan's sun sank like a fiery disk behind distant mountains, Fob Chapman echoed with the familiar sounds of soldiers, clanging metal trays, boots stomping on the floor, and the smell of MRE's old frying oil, tomato powder, and a hint of sharp chili. The cramped, noisy mess hall was like a giant iron skillet brimming with raw energy. Rachel entered with her tray, deliberately choosing an empty corner table by the wall, where a flickering bulb cast just enough light to read a medical report. She wanted quiet, to be invisible. But invisibility was never an option in this base. Minutes later, attention zeroed in. A group of SEALs at the central table, always loud as a night market, laughed and watched her. The clatter of forks and knives on the table became a drumbeat of warning. A SEAL named Brooks, muscles bulging with veins and a grating laugh, approached. In his hand was a bottle of bright red hot sauce. With a flick of his wrist, the thick liquid poured onto Rachel's tray. Her food turned into a red, bloody mess, like blood seeping through bandages. "Spice up your dinner, princess," Brooks taunted, and the laughter behind him roared like a wave. Rachel looked at her tray, then slowly took a napkin, wiping away the red stains. Each motion was calm, but inside her chest, her heart pounded like a hammer. Not from fear, but from memory. Meals, sabotaged in another place. 3 years ago, before everything exploded and her unit was erased from records. As Brooks turned away, another hand appeared. A clean white napkin slid toward her. "We all know they play dirty," a voice whispered, low enough for only Rachel to hear. Lisa Park, the young woman with neatly tied hair and sharp, weary eyes, sat down without asking. Unlike the raucous laughter across the room, she sat quietly, like a shadow. Rachel wiped her tray, salvaging what she could. "I've dealt with worse," she replied softly, her voice even, like a clean cut through emotion. Lisa leaned closer, whispering lower. "There are things you need to know." Building 3. Basement. Rachel paused. Her brown eyes flicked to Lisa, probing. But Lisa had already looked away, pretending to focus on her meal as if nothing happened. "If you need proof, remember that place." Before Rachel could ask more, Lisa stood and melted into the crowd. Across the room, Steele and his loyal SEALs still watched. Their smiles were no longer just mockery. There was a hint of suspicion, as if they'd seen more than they wanted. Rachel sat alone, quietly chewing cold food. The noise around her was like a wall, but her mind drifted elsewhere. Building 3. A plain name, but in her mind, it glowed like a warning signal. Outside, the Afghan sky darkened to purple. Desert wind swept through the base's corridors, carrying red dust that clung to uniforms. Rachel finished eating, cleared her tray, and her eyes briefly met Rodriguez's. He sat alone, not joining the noisy crowd, watching her from afar with unreadable eyes. In that gaze, Rachel saw calculation, as if he were piecing together a larger puzzle, as if he'd seen her demeanor before, in people who should have been dead. She turned away, her metal tray clanging into the trash bin, the sharp sound echoing in the mess hall. A simple sound, but it marked the start of a journey, with no return. Dawn at Chapman wasn't beautiful. It wasn't golden or radiant. It was gray, dusty, and cold. Early light fell on cracked concrete walls, casting a bleak ash gray over the base. 4 Humvees roared to life, their engines growling like steel beasts waiting to be unleashed. Rachel adjusted her rifle strap, sitting silently in the last vehicle. The smell of diesel, rusted metal, and the stifling weight of thick armor pressed against her chest. The SEALs bantered over the internal radio, their laughter and jabs at her scattered through, but Rachel focused on the engine's steady hum, a reminder that she was heading into a place that had swallowed countless lives. At the morning briefing, the topographic map was spread out. Red lines marked the patrol route. Tangi Valley, a long, narrow gash flanked by steep rock faces, blocking all sightlines. Rachel studied the map, a familiar unease prickling her chest. She'd seen terrain like this, stood in another canyon, in a country no one admitted she'd been to, and there, a convoy had rolled in with the same confidence, only to end in smoke, fire, and screams. She swallowed hard, raised her hand. Her voice was small but firm. "Colonel, Section 38, Romeo, Quebec. There's a choke point. Should we consider an alternate route?" The room paused, then erupted in laughter. Steele leaned back in his chair, smirking with disdain. "Now the doctor's a tactician? Stay in your lane. Leave combat to those who actually know how to fight." The SEALs joined in, their laughter scraping her ears like metal. But Rachel saw it. Rodriguez and Williams exchanged a brief glance. They noticed something too. Still, Steele shut down any debate. And so, the convoy rolled out, roaring eastward, into the giant stone jaws opening before them. Rachel sat in the back seat, clutching her medical kit between her knees. Her fingers traced the items inside by habit: tourniquets, hemostatic agents, morphine, surgical blade. Small, fragile things, but sometimes stronger than a magazine of bullets. Through the armored window, she saw locals quietly slip into their homes as the convoy approached. Men's eyes followed, dark and unreadable, heavy with anticipation. Women pulled children inside, their burqas fluttering like black wings. The village road was unnaturally silent. Over the radio, Steele's voice crackled, rough but confident. "Maintain speed, hold formation." The convoy crawled into the valley. Steep cliffs loomed on both sides, massive rocks stacked like the teeth of a giant beast waiting to snap shut. No place to hide, no other path to take. Rachel gripped the handrail. Her heart pounded, memories flooding back. The smell of smoke, the sound of gunfire, screams she'd never forget. Through her earpiece, another mocking laugh. "Careful, Band-Aid girl. Don't pass out before we reach the rendezvous. Jenkins." Still that taunting tone. But he didn't see Rachel's eyes that had witnessed a unit burned alive in terrain like this. She opened her mouth, ready to warn again. But Steele's voice cut in, silencing her. "Red 4, keep the radio clear. We don't need a nurse giving tactical advice." And then, silence fell. A kind only those who'd survived ambushes recognized. The wind seemed to stop. The road was empty, barren, too quiet. Rachel swallowed her unease, her hand tightening on the rifle across her lap. A chill ran down her spine. She knew the trap was set. The first explosion didn't sound like gunfire. It was deeper, louder, like the earth roaring. An IED buried under the dry road detonated beneath the second Humvee. The multi-ton vehicle was lifted like a toy, flipping midair before crashing with a deafening boom. Flames erupted from the fuel tank, engulfing the vehicle in a golden blaze. The deadly silence shattered. Then the valley exploded. A K-47 seconds roared, relentless like hail. Bullets raked the steel, sparking wildly. From the cliffs, enemy fire poured down like a storm. RPGs whistled, carving deadly arcs before slamming into rocks near the convoy, unleashing black clouds of smoke. The radio erupted with shouts. Orders, curses, and screams swallowed by chaos. "Contact! Contact 360! Hold positions!" In the last Humvee, Rachel flung the door open before her mind could stop her. Her body moved like a machine programmed by combat instinct. The fire from the overturned vehicle cast a red glow on her face, sweat streaming despite the cold morning air. Screams echoed from the burning Humvee. Soldiers still alive, 2 of them. One unconscious, one screaming, his leg pinned. Rachel charged forward, smoke searing her lungs, heat stinging her skin. She jammed her rifle into the ground, her hands gripping the warped vehicle frame. The metal burned, but she didn't let go. She pulled, feeling like she was breaking a monster's spine barehanded. A gap opened just enough. She reached in, grabbing Peterson, his eyes wide, thrashing as flames licked his leg. "Move! Move!" Rachel gritted her teeth, pulling him out with all her strength. The heat shoved her back, but Peterson was free, rolling on the sand, screaming in pain. One more. She ducked back into the burning frame, deeper this time. The second soldier was unconscious, blood streaming from his head, heavy as lead. Rachel looped her arms under his shoulders, dragging him out inch by inch. Small explosions popped from the ammo compartment, bullets cooking off like firecrackers. Only seconds remained before the vehicle became an inferno. One final pull, and Rachel and the soldier tumbled out, rolling across the dust just as the Humvee exploded behind them. The blast threw her forward, dust coating her hair and blood trickling from a gash on her face. She spun, shielding the two wounded men as hot metal shards rained around them. Bullets still whizzed overhead. Taliban fired from all directions, shadows flickering behind rocks. The SEALs returned fire, but they were outgunned. Every second, survival grew thinner. Rachel pressed her hand to Peterson's wound, blood soaking through her gloves. She pulled out hemostatic bandages, wrapping tightly until Peterson screamed and passed out. She turned to Kowalski, his head bloody but breathing. She checked his pupils, then rolled him to keep his airway clear. "Medic!" A shout rang from the lead vehicle. Rachel turned. Steele. Lieutenant Steele lay sprawled by the command Humvee, his abdomen torn open, intestines spilling out like a grisly ribbon. His face was pale. His eyes stunned the eyes of a man who'd scorned her, now pleading for life. Bullets tore through the air. An RPG screamed past, slamming into the cliff. Fire, smoke, chaos. Rachel glanced at the two she'd saved. They were alive, stable for now. Steele, if she didn't act, he'd be dead in minutes. She grabbed her medical kit, sprinting through the hail of bullets, leaping from rock to open ground. Her breath came in short gasps, her heart pounded, but her hands didn't shake. She reached Steele, dropped to her knees, eyes locked on the horrific wound. "You'll live," she whispered, not caring if he heard. Scalpel, clamps, gauze, everything spilled onto the dusty ground. Amid the screams, gunfire, and explosions, her hands worked with cold precision. Death surrounded them, but these hands were defying it, stitch by stitch, clamp by clamp. Bullets rained like hail, machine gun bursts pounding from both sides of the valley. The ground shook with RPG explosions. The air was thick with gun smoke, dust, and the acrid stench of burning metal. The world was a furnace. No place safe. Rachel knelt beside Steele. His massive body now looked frail, his skin ashen, eyes rolling in shock. The abdominal wound gaped, intestines exposed, red and gray mixed with dust. A wound any field medic would deem unsalvageable. But Rachel wasn't an ordinary field medic. She drew her scalpel, its blade glinting through the smoky haze. As it touched skin, Steele let out a guttural roar, his chest heaving. Rachel swiftly injected ketamine, enough to dull the pain without knocking him out. He needed to stay conscious to keep his heart fighting. "Listen to me," she growled, her face inches from his. "This will hurt, but you'll live. Got it? You'll live." Steele groaned, his lips bloodied, but his eyes flickered with a faint nod. Enough for Rachel to begin. She worked in unimaginable conditions. Dust coating her gloves, bullets whistling overhead, explosions shaking her body. But her hands were steady as steel. She controlled the bleeding with military hemostatic gauze, each movement swift, precise, exact. She located the torn intestine, flushing it with saline from a prepared IV bag. She stitched with small, deep, accurate sutures that would make a hospital surgeon marvel. A shout came from behind. "We're out of ammo!" A SEAL yelled, loading his last magazine. But Rachel didn't look up. Her world was her hands and the fading life before her. An RPG streaked in. The explosion hit less than 10 meters away, kicking up dust and rock fragments that sliced Rachel's cheek. Blood dripped, but her hands didn't falter. She used specialized dissolvable sutures, ones only those in covert units would know, to close the intestine. Each stitch was firm, despite the trembling ground. When finished, she carefully repositioned the organs, covering them with her last sterile gauze. Steele was still breathing. Weak, but steady. Life clung to him like a flickering flame. Through her earpiece, Williams's hoarse voice. Red 4. Status. Rachel pressed the radio, her voice calm to the point of chilling. Type a casualty. Sutured. Stabilizing. I need medevac now. A bitter laugh crackled through Steele, who'd always mocked her, now lay under her hands, saved. But no one in the team laughed anymore. They'd seen the impossible. A nurse performing battlefield surgery under fire, as if in a hospital operating room. Above, the Taliban pressed harder. A SEAL fell, shot through the shoulder, his scream echoing behind the third Humvee. Rodriguez crawled to Rachel, providing cover fire. He glanced at the bloodied tools, her unshaking hands, and his eyes flickered with realization. He'd seen this demeanor before. Not in a nurse. In a unit erased from records. Rachel didn't meet his gaze. She kept tightening tourniquets, stemming blood, checking Steele's pulse with 2 fingers. Still there. Strong enough to give him a chance. The roar of engines sounded in the distance. The radio crackled with the pilot's voice. Dust off 33. Approaching LZ. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. In this storm of bullets, 3 minutes was a lifetime. Rachel looked up for the first time since starting the surgery. Before her, Taliban were descending the cliffs, dark waves of men with AKs and RPGs. The SEALs fought back, but their guns were running dry. She took a deep breath, her own blood dripping onto her gloves. She knew. To get Steele and the others onto the chopper, someone would have to do the impossible again. Bullets buzzed like angry wasps. Taliban shouts in Pashto echoed off the rocks. The SEALs were weakening, their last magazines dwindling, their rifles red hot. Time crawled, each second a death sentence. Rachel knelt by Steele, holding pressure on his wound, glancing at the sky. The dust-off chopper wasn't here yet. If this dragged on a few more minutes, no one would survive. In her medical kit, beneath the gauze and drugs, was a small encrypted radio, a device she should never have. She'd sworn never to use it again. But as her eyes swept over the convoy, the bloodied faces of those who'd scorned her, she knew her options were gone. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling briefly before steadying. A familiar motion, etched from a past life one the world believed was buried. She twisted the dial, tuning the frequency. Static hissed in her earpiece. Then she transmitted. Firehawk 6. This is Ghost 71. Close quarters danger. Mission Grid 38 Romeo Quebec. Mike 4521. Friendly marked by IR strobe. Repeat. Close quarters danger. Strike confirmed coordinates. The radio fell silent. Only the crackle of gunfire. Rachel held the device, eyes unblinking. The SEALs stared, stunned. They'd never heard that call sign. A voice responded, slow and skeptical. Ghost 71? Authenticate. Call Charlie. Without hesitation, Rachel recited a long string of codes. Numbers, letters, ciphers memorized, burned into her bones. Codes no medical manual contained. Silence. Then the pilot's voice, clear and urgent. Ghost 71, Firehawk 6. Ordnance incoming. 30 seconds. Take cover. Rachel switched to the team's radio, her voice like steel. Everyone down, friendly fire incoming. No one had time to question. Survival instinct drove the team into rock crevices, bodies pressed flat to the ground. Rachel shielded Steele with her body, clutching her medical kit. Then the sky fell. Artillery rounds screamed down, tearing into the cliffs. Explosions rocked the earth, pillars of fire swallowing the Taliban positions. The ground shook violently, boulders tumbling like a landslide, smoke and dust blotting out the sky. The Taliban's shouts turned to screams of terror, then drowned in chaos. When the barrage ended, Tangi Valley was unrecognizable. Ambush points were flattened. The SEALs looked up, eyes red from smoke and dust, staring at Rachel as if seeing her for the first time. Williams, panting, whispered, How did you know that frequency?" Rachel didn't answer. She checked Steele's pulse, adjusted Peterson's tourniquet. But in Rodriguez's eyes, her silence spoke louder than a confession. He'd heard the stories of a unit that vanished 3 years ago. Ghosts in the files. The dustoff's voice crackled. "LZ hot." 1 minute. The chopper's engines grew louder, rotor wash stirring the dust. Surviving Taliban retreated, though sporadic gunfire echoed from afar. The fight wasn't over, but they had a chance. Rachel folded the radio, tucking it back into her kit. Part of her wanted to throw it into the fire, to bury it all again. But it was too late. The name Ghost 71 had been spoken over the air, echoing in everyone's ears. No one in the team mocked her anymore. No one dared. The first rotor blade sliced the air like a knife. Dust and red sand swirled into a blinding vortex, cloaking Tangi Valley. A black hawk appeared, its steel belly glinting, circling like a predator seeking a landing zone. But the ground below was still hell. Though battered by artillery, the Taliban hadn't given up. From rock crevices, they rose, firing fiercely. Bullets tore through the smoke, sparking off Humvees. Another RPG screeched, a deadly arc aiming for the chopper. "RPG, 2 o'clock, a SEAL shouted. The Black Hawk swerved sharply, the rocket grazing past and exploding on the cliff. Rock fragments rained down. Rachel lay prone beside Steele, shielding him from shrapnel, her hands still pressing gauze to his abdomen. His pulse flickered under her fingers. Any jolt could tear her fragile stitches. Williams crawled to her, M4 in hand, eyes blazing. "We need to get him out first. The safe window's only seconds." Rachel nodded, her face caked with blood and dust. She scanned Peterson, 10 meters away, his leg badly burned but conscious. Kowalski, still unconscious, breathing raggedly. Each needed to board the chopper, but not all at once. "We'll form a perimeter," Rodriguez barked, his voice cutting through the gunfire. "Cover Cooper." The SEALs shifted instantly, forming a semicircle, returning fire with lethal precision, cutting into the Taliban wave. Rachel gritted her teeth, grabbing Steele. He was heavy as a boulder, his massive frame now a motionless burden. But she didn't stop. She dragged him through the sand, step by step, toward the Black Hawk, lowering its altitude. Bullets struck the ground around her, kicking up dust. One grazed her shoulder, tearing her uniform, blood spraying, but she didn't pause. Peterson, his face twisted in pain, crawled with his hands. Rachel shouted, "Keep your head down. I'll get you next." As she pulled Steele to the perimeter, 2 SEALs rushed forward, lifting him onto a stretcher. Sweat and blood soaked Rachel's uniform, but she ignored it. The Black Hawk landed in a dust storm, its door sliding open. 2 medics leapt out. Shouts rang. "Load the wounded now." Rachel helped hoist Steele aboard, securing straps around him, then sprinted back into the fight. She wouldn't leave Peterson and Kowalski behind. As she returned, another RPG struck near the overturned Humvee. The shockwave threw Rachel down, dust coating her. Her ears rang, sounds muffled. But Peterson's image, crawling with a trail of blood in the sand, pulled her up. She ran on instinct, reaching him, wrapping her arms around his chest, dragging him as bullets rained. Her small frame became a living shield. Rodriguez and Jenkins provided cover, firing relentlessly, forcing the Taliban to duck. They saw it, this small nurse doing what none of them could imagine. Peterson was loaded onto the chopper, his body trembling but eyes open, staring at Rachel as if she were inexplicable. One left. Kowalski. He was still unconscious, blood pooling in the sand. Rachel knelt, checking his breathing. Weak. But there. Without thinking, she lifted him, her shaking legs defying his weight. Bullets whistled past her ears. A seal fell behind her, shot in the shoulder. Williams rushed to return fire, shouting, "Hurry, Cooper! We can't hold much longer." She clenched her jaw, carrying Kowalski step by heavy step, his blood soaking her chest. The Black Hawk's door was meters away. A medic reached out, and Rachel nearly threw Kowalski inside. Her body collapsed afterward, gasping, hands shaking from exertion. Rodriguez yanked her up, practically tossing her into the cabin. "Go! The next chopper will get us." The Black Hawk lifted off, dust obscuring the valley. Rachel looked down through the open door. The remaining SEALs still fought, small figures in a sea of smoke and fire. She wanted to jump back, but William's hand gripped her shoulder. "You've done enough. They're alive because of you." The rotor wash whipped Rachel's hair, her eyes fixed on the figures below. Steele, Peterson, Kowalski all out, but the fight wasn't over. The Black Hawk landed at the field airstrip in a chaos of dust and sand. The door opened, and medics rushed in, stretchers unloaded swiftly. Steele was unconscious, his abdomen still wrapped in Rachel's battlefield bandages. Peterson groaned, his leg badly burned. Kowalski remained comatose, his breathing faint. Rachel stepped off last, her legs trembling, her uniform torn and blood soaked her own and others. Her boots hit the concrete, and exhaustion nearly buckled her. But she stood. She couldn't fall now. In the surgical tent, halogen lights glared. The chief surgeon, Major Harrington, rushed over, his voice sharp. "Who did this stitching?" All eyes turned to Rachel. Harrington bent over Steele's abdomen, his fingers trembling as they traced the field sutures. His eyes widened. Unbelievable intestinal sutures in combat under those conditions. With no infection? "Who taught you this?" Rachel didn't answer. Her brown eyes met his, calm. She only said, "If I hadn't, he'd be dead before reaching here." Harrington looked up, holding her gaze a second longer. Respect, mixed with suspicion, flickered in his eyes. He knew this wasn't the skill of an ordinary medic. Other nurses whispered. One muttered, "That's the kind of stitching only special ops medics know." But the ghost unit is gone. Rachel left the operating table, stepping outside the tent into the cooler but still stifling air. In her mind, old echoes rose. The smell of burning smoke, screams, names that no longer existed. She breathed deeply, forcing them back into the dark. Outside, Rodriguez was waiting. He leaned against a wooden post, his uniform bloodied and dusty, eyes sunken but alert. "Don't tell me you learned that in med school," he said softly. No trace of mockery. Rachel stayed silent, meeting his gaze. Rodriguez tilted his head, eyes narrowing, as if matching her face to a memory. 3 years ago, I heard about a ghost unit ambushed. They said no one survived. But today, I saw someone stitch a gut wound in combat like it was heart surgery. I saw someone call in artillery with a frequency only ghosts would know. So what am I supposed to believe? Rachel tightened her grip on her medical kit, brushing past without a word. But her silent back was heavier than any admission. That night, in a small restroom, Rachel sat alone. The yellow lamp cast her shadow long on the wall. Her bandaged hands trembled as they touched the encrypted radio hidden in her backpack. She'd risked using it, and now there was no going back. Once Ghost 71 was spoken, someone would hear. Someone would come looking. The door creaked open. Colonel Winters stepped in. She didn't need to ask. Her sharp eyes told Rachel the suspicions were mounting. "Anything you need to explain?" Winters asked, her voice calm but edged like a blade behind velvet. Rachel looked up. They held each other's gaze in silence. Finally, Rachel said, "I did what was needed to keep the team alive." Winters nodded slightly. "I don't dispute that, but I need to know, who is Rachel Cooper, really?" No answer. Only a heavy silence stretched between the two women. One held power, the other secrets. Winters left, leaving Rachel sitting, her eyes dark. The question hung unanswered. Was Ghost 71 still alive? Right here in this base? The night at Fob Chapman was cold, eerily quiet. After a day steeped in antiseptic and the moans of the wounded, Rachel slipped out of the field hospital. She took a path few used, her steps silent. In her pocket, Lisa Park's note burned. Building 3. Basement. Building 3 was an old Soviet-era concrete block, now a supply warehouse. Guards rarely paid attention. It looked unremarkable. But Rachel knew real secrets rarely hid in heavily guarded places. They lurked in spots no one considered. The basement door wasn't locked. The hinges creaked softly as she pulled it open, revealing a dark staircase. Rachel flicked on her flashlight, descending step by step, her breath mingling with the musty smell of mold and rust. The air grew heavier, as if the past were pressing on her shoulders. The basement was surprisingly large. Wooden crates and old filing cabinets lined the walls. But what stopped Rachel was the far wall. A large board was pinned with papers, photos, maps. She stepped closer, her heart tightening. In each photo, familiar figures emerged. The ghost unit, faces obscured, blurred. But she recognized their stances, their gaits, the way they held weapons. Her brothers in arms, whom the world believed died with her 3 years ago. You know them, don't you? A voice spoke from the darkness. Rachel spun, her M9 drawn by reflex. But her flashlight caught Lisa Park, hands raised in reassurance. The timid demeanor of a rookie corporal was gone. Instead, Lisa's eyes were sharp, cold as steel. I've been collecting these for 2 years, Lisa whispered, pointing to the wall. Every time something impossible happened in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, a Taliban sniper killed from an unbelievable range, a rescue under hopeless fire, there's a ghost in the reports. They said you all died, but the truth is, you vanished. Rachel swallowed hard. The images brought back the nightmare in Pakistan. The night 24 elite warriors were led into a trap. The night the ghost unit was erased. She remembered blood, fire, and screams over the radio before the signal died. Operation Twilight Hammer, Lisa said, naming the mission Rachel had buried. It came up a few times in redacted files. Never public, but I know it killed the ghosts. Rachel tightened her grip on her pistol, then lowered it. She exhaled, voice hoarse. It didn't just kill the ghosts. It betrayed us. Someone sold our position. And when the blood reached our eyes, they gave us 2 choices: die or disappear. Lisa nodded slowly, her eyes blazing with anger. My brother, Ghost 9. He didn't come back from that night. They gave my mother a flag and a lie. I swore I'd find the truth. And when I saw you, Rachel, I knew. A ghost had finally surfaced. The air in the basement thickened. Rachel looked at the wall, at images of her old team. Ghost 14's unmistakable run. Ghost 4 holding his rifle backward as always. She choked back emotion. Are there others, alive? Lisa nodded faintly. Scattered, a few ghosts still out there working their own way. But someone's hunting them. Hunting you. And now they've smelled blood. Footsteps echoed from the stairs. Heavy, tactical, deliberate. Rachel pulled Lisa behind a filing cabinet, her finger to her lips. She recognized that movement, not Taliban, not regular guards. These were trained operatives. 5 figures emerged under flashlight beams. Leading was Williams, followed by Rodriguez, and 3 other SEALs. They fanned out, securing the room like a raid. When they saw Rachel, Williams lowered his weapon, his eyes grave. We knew we'd find you here, he said. Jenkins saw you heading this way. Rachel kept her voice even. This is private. Rodriguez stepped forward, scanning the photos, then turning to Rachel. Not private anymore, Cooper. This It's about the ghosts, isn't it? The unit that never really disappeared. Before Rachel could respond, a deep voice rang from the stairs. A voice of authority, familiar, making her heart sink. Exactly, it said. That black operation never truly ended. The last figure to appear wore no combat uniform, but his presence radiated power. Rachel recognized him instantly. General Thomas Morrison, Deputy Director of Special Operations Command, the man who signed off on Twilight Hammer. He looked straight at Rachel, a cold smile tugging his lips. Go 71. Hard to track down. But finally, you revealed yourself. The basement air grew dense as General Thomas Morrison descended the final step. He carried no guards, no weapons. But his face, his posture, his cold eyes made the room full of SEALs shift back half a step. This wasn't a man here to negotiate. This was an architect of war, accustomed to commanding death. Rachel stood still, her body taut as a bowstring. For years, she'd imagined facing him, the man who approved the blood-soaked operation that erased the ghost unit. In her mind, the encounter was always amid blood and bullets, not in a musty basement with teammates half trusting, half doubting her. Ghost 71. Morrison's voice was heavy as lead. You've been elusive. We tried many ways, but it turns out we didn't need to. You exposed yourself. Rodriguez stepped forward, voice tense. What did he just call you? Ghost? Rachel didn't answer. She only stared at Morrison, her eyes smoldering. What do you want? Morrison shrugged, as if discussing the weather. I'm here to thank you. Your actions yesterday, surgery under fire, calling artillery on a frequency that no longer exists, all recorded. Exactly as we expected. Williams frowned. Expected? What's that supposed to mean? Morrison turned to the SEALs, his gaze sweeping over them. Your convoy wasn't attacked by chance. It was staged. The route, the timing, the forces all planned. The goal wasn't to kill you. It was to confirm if Ghost 71 was truly alive. The room froze. Williams cursed under his breath. Rodriguez clenched his fists. Lisa pressed against the wall, her eyes blazing with fury. Only Rachel remained expressionless, as if she'd suspected it. You used us as bait, she said, her voice like steel. No, Morrison corrected, a cold smile forming. We used you as bait, and you didn't disappoint. Rodriguez growled. How many lives were sacrificed for your political game? Morrison didn't flinch. How many more will be lost if we don't find the traitor? The ghost unit was erased by an inside hand. Intelligence sold to the Taliban. I needed the surviving ghosts to draw the rats out of their holes. He stepped toward the photo board, his fingers brushing Lisa's collected evidence. You thought you were the hunters? Wrong. You were the bait. But bait draws out the predator. And now, the prey has taken the hook. Williams gritted his teeth. What are you talking about? Who's the traitor? Morrison turned, his eyes sharp as knives. Someone close. High-ranking, with authority over operations. But we can't touch them without proof. We needed a ghost to surface. We needed you, Rachel. Rachel crossed her arms, hiding the rage boiling inside. Why should I help you? 3 years ago you signed our death warrant. And you survived, Morrison replied, unapologetic. The harsh truth is, the ghost unit was deemed an acceptable loss. But now, you have a chance to vanish forever, or become what the enemy fears most, a ghost reborn. Rodriguez stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. And if we refuse? Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then, you return to base as if nothing happened. But remember those hunting. Ghosts won't stop. They'll find you. And next time, there'll be no rescue. No one spoke. Only the creaking ceiling fan broke the silence. Sweat beaded on William's forehead, but his eyes stayed on Rachel. They all waited for her answer. Rachel looked at Morrison, Then at the SEALs men who'd insulted and shunned her but fought beside her through Tangi Valley's hell. She saw Rodriguez's fierce loyalty, William's skeptical readiness, Jenkins' guilt-ridden shock, Lisa's unquenchable fire. "You want us to play your game?" Rachel whispered. "Fine. But remember, ghosts don't work for anyone. Ghosts work for the truth." The room seemed to tremble. Morrison gave a faint, triumphant smile. "Excellent. You've chosen the side of darkness. A transport arrives in 6 hours. Prepare. Once you board, there's no turning back." He turned to leave but paused at the stairs, glancing back at Rachel. "Oh, Cooper. Lieutenant Steele isn't fully awake, but he keeps asking for you. If I were you, I'd see him before you vanish." The iron door slammed shut behind Morrison, leaving the basement in silence. Rodriguez spoke first. "So, Ghost 71, what do we do?" Rachel took a deep breath, eyes on the wall of photos her dead and living teammates. She turned, voice firm. "We hunt. Not for Morrison. For the ghosts who haven't found peace." The field hospital at night was like a makeshift chapel. Dim fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic mixing with the groans of the wounded. Rachel walked past rows of white curtained beds, her heart beating slow but heavy. 6 hours from now, she'd vanish from this base, from the name Rachel Cooper. 6 hours from now, Ghost 71 would return. But before she left, there was one thing she had to do. Steele lay in the ICU, his massive frame now small amid life support machines. Bandages wrapped his abdomen, IV lines pierced his arms. A ventilator breathed rhythmically. As Rachel entered, his eyes cracked open. Weak, but bright. "Cooper," he rasped, each word scraping his throat. "They say I died twice on the table. But you—" He paused, taking a trembling breath. "You pulled me back." Rachel pulled a chair close to his bed. "You're too stubborn to die, Lieutenant." Steele gave a painful but genuine smile. "No, not that. I survived because of you. And I owe you." A heavy silence settled. Rachel met the eyes that once mocked her, called her Band-Aid girl. Now, they held only regret and gratitude. "I was wrong about you, Cooper. About everything. You're not just a medic. You're more of a warrior than any of us." Rachel wanted to brush it off, but her hands trembled slightly. She'd heard countless thanks from survivors, but never from someone who'd humiliated her to her core. Steele continued, his voice fading amid the machines. "When I heard that radio call, Ghost 71, I knew it. My uncle served in special forces. He talked about the Ghost unit, said it was America's sharpest blade. When I heard that name on the radio, I knew I'd been completely wrong." He swallowed hard, his large hand trembling as it reached for hers. She hesitated, then let him take it. The hand that once tore her blouse now gripped hers in desperate weakness. "I'm sorry, Cooper. No, Ghost. It's an honor to serve beside you, even if I was too stupid to see it." Rachel felt a knot in her chest loosen. Not forgiveness, not entirely. But at least Steele saw who she truly was. "You'll recover," she whispered. "And you'll lead the team, stronger than before. But remember, real strength isn't shouting louder or lifting heavier. It's bleeding for your team, even when they don't deserve it." Steele nodded, his eyes glistening. "I won't forget." A soft knock came at the door. Jenkins stood there, haggard after the night's nightmare. "Cooper, Morrison wants us to prep. But Steele, he wanted to see you first." Rachel squeezed Steele's hand one last time, then let go. His eyes followed her, pleading. "Will I see you again?" Rachel paused at the threshold. "Keep the team strong, Lieutenant. Protect them. If fate allows, we'll meet again." She stepped out, leaving Steele alone in the cold white light. But in his eyes a new spark burned faith in the woman he once despised. 6 hours later, on a sunlit airstrip, Rachel stood with a small group: Rodriguez, Williams, Jenkins, and Lisa Park. They'd made their choice, to leave the light of the regular military and step into the darkness of ghosts. A black helicopter, unmarked, no insignia, landed with whirling rotors. Morrison waited, nodding. Time's up. Board. From now on, you're not SEALs, not a combat medic. You're ghosts. Before stepping aboard, Jenkins turned to Rachel. So, what do we call you, Cooper? Ghost 71? Rachel tightened her backpack strap, eyes on the distant mountains. Call me what I've always been. A warrior who keeps her promises. The helicopter lifted off. Below, Fob Chapman shrank, then vanished. But as the chopper banked east, Rachel glimpsed a dark figure on the operations building's roof. A silhouette, motionless, watching them. Too far to see a face, but the stance was too familiar. Another ghost. Or a traitor? The radio in her ear crackled, then a voice froze her. Ghost 71, this is Ghost 33. Welcome back to the world of the living. We've been waiting. The connection cut off. In the cabin, Williams looked up, eyes wide. Ghost 33 was reported KIA in Twilight Hammer. Rachel stared at the horizon, dawn's light glinting off her scarred, secretive face. Maybe death is negotiable. She turned to her new team, voice resolute. No turning back. You ready? Rodriguez answered for them all. We're your six. Lead the way, Ghost. The helicopter vanished into the clouds, carrying warriors no longer of the light. For Rachel Cooper, now Ghost 71, this wasn't an end. It was the start of a new hunt. In war, some deaths are not etched on tombstones, only buried in classified files. The Ghost Unit was one of them. 3 years ago, they vanished from history. But tonight, a ghost has returned. Rachel didn't just save the lives of those who once scorned her. She uncovered a truth far greater. Ghosts never die. In the basement of Building 3, erased records and hidden photos are just the first pieces of the puzzle. The voice of Ghost 33 crackling through the radio proves the game runs deeper than anyone imagined. Rachel is no longer alone. The SEAL team men who once called her just a medic now follow her into the darkness. They are no longer SEALs. They are ghosts. What do you think? Is Ghost 33 an ally or a traitor? Share your theories in the comments below. If you want to join Rachel and the Ghost team in the next chapter, hit that subscribe button, because the War of the Ghosts has only just begun.